So, from this selection of reading, we've learned that African American English vernacular is a dialect of English with its own grammar and its own structural rules. It's its own language. And while it does have its own kind of slang, it's still not a simplified version of English. And we actually can see how this slang that exists in African American English vernacular starts to permeate the languages within other countercultures, and then eventually becomes mainstream slang as well. So it's really common to see it in like queer communities and in drag communities in particular. So words like snatched and wig and queen, as well as sort of the physical emphasis that we put on language, like clapping and head movements and things like that. That all comes from African American English vernacular and from Black culture. And so, like I said, it's not illiterate English. African American English vernacular is not simplified English. It's not illiterate English, but it does have its roots in pidgins and in creoles that were developed out of a desperation for the need to communicate with other people. So, if we kind of go back to the transatlantic slave trade, um, individuals from various areas of West Africa were forced into enslavement. And so they didn't speak the same language. There's so many languages spoken in Africa and in West Africa, and this group of people did not speak the same language. So without a common language between them, they had to develop a system for communicating with each other on their journey over. Once they arrive in the US and they have this sort of established Creole, this established pidgin with each other, they then have to adjust that to be able to communicate with white Americans. And then once they have that, they again have to reestablish their system for communication to account for those enslaved African Americans already existing, and to account for new enslaved Africans that are joining their communities as well. And so it's a language that was kind of constantly evolving for several generations, with so many different influences from Standard English to their West African languages to even like Irish languages. I think that's something that Rickford talks about in his article, is that we do see sort of similar grammatical structures as we see in other languages, and not African languages, in languages like Irish languages. So, and then we see, if we're looking at sort of post emancipation America, we move into the segregation, we see how Black communities are then able to take that language and refine that language into their own language, into a real language that becomes sort of independent and has its own regional dialects away from other Black communities. So we have like northern dialects that differ from southern dialects that differ from central dialects, based on that ability and or based on those movements. Um, let's see, what else do I have here? I think something that's really important to think about is with the refining of African American English vernacular in segregation, and then we move into sort of Black cultural movements like jazz and hip hop, we see this sort of appreciation, the rise of appreciation for African American English vernacular. However, this appropriation and acceptance has moved into something this appreciation and acceptance has moved into something more of appropriation and conditional emulation, and that doesn't account for the generations of work in building this language that deserve respect, the generations of pain in building this language that deserve respect. And for that reason, it co-opts the culture and it's gaining from culture. So when we have non-Black and non-African American folks who are using African American English vernacular, who are engaging in Black culture for monetary gain, for cultural gain, whatever, it's that in itself is inherently destructive and oppressive, because we're able to choose, those people are able to pick and choose aspects of a culture that they want to celebrate, while we continue to demonize other aspects of that culture. And this is like really evident when we look at the need to code switch from AAEV into standard English in various situations, like academic situations and in professional situations. And we also see it in I think it's really common for young women to have really long acrylic nails and really elaborate acrylic nail art. And for a long time, that was just within the Black community, and it was not positively received by mainstream communities. I think a lot of ghetto trends like that are becoming more mainstream, while we are still oppressing Black women and Black folks in professional settings, in individual settings. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that, I guess.